Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 131, Meno 92c to E. Anytus had agreed that the criteria for a good teacher are that he claims to be able to teach and that he makes money from teaching. These seem to be quite sensible criteria. It might seem that someone with no intention of teaching would be a bad teacher. Also, someone who makes money from teaching would appear to have some reputation as a good teacher, on the assumption that people don't pay bad teachers, they only pay good teachers. And with most professions, you would be able to judge whether a teacher is good simply by looking at the products made by the students. For example, the student of a carpenter who makes good furniture may be considered to have learnt well from the teacher. And the teacher taught the students well as well. The sophists not only claim to teach, but they make enormous amounts of money from teaching, which would appear to indicate that they are good teachers. And yet Anytus regards them as bad teachers. We might suppose that the criteria were not strict enough. For example, instead of accepting that one of the criteria should be that a good teacher is one who claims to be able to teach, to this should be added and is correct in assessing that he is able to teach. As for the second criterion, it's not enough to say that a good teacher is one who makes lots of money from teaching, but one who makes lots of money from people who are not completely insane. Anytus claims that people who entrust their young ones to sophists are insane. The main reason for this problem is that Socrates only told Anytus after these criteria were made and agreed upon. What Meno wanted to learn, he didn't actually want to learn, Socrates is lying, but what Meno is allegedly looking for is to become like Anytus. A good person, an apparently good person, someone with arete, but arete of the sort that Anytus possesses. Were the sophists to claim that they could teach people to become like Anytus, they would be lying, because they don't actually claim that. And were people to pay lots of money to sophists in order to make their young people like Anytus, they would be mad, but they do not think that the sophists would teach people to be like Anytus. Now it's time to get back to the dialogue. Socrates is still talking. Alagar tutus epidetoumen tines esin parhusan menon afikomenos moxeros genoito. Hutoimen gar subule eston hoi sophistai. Alade ekenus epehe min, kai ton patrikonton de hetairon iuergetes on phrasos auto paratinas afikomenos entosaute pole, ten areten hen nun de godi elson, genoitan axios logu. But we are searching not for these, the ones who were Meno to arrive at them, he would become wretched. For these, if you wish, let them be the sophists. But tell us those, and do this man, your paternal friend, a favour by telling him, by arriving at whom, in the plural, in such a great city, he would become worthy of the name pertaining to the arete which I detailed just now. Socrates seems to be quite happy to ditch the sophists, so they must have served their purpose or purposes. We now know, of course, that Anytus doesn't like the sophists. Socrates has now portrayed them as teachers who make their students worse. He says wretched. And we need to remember that Meno is still here, he's still listening to the conversation, and it's interesting that he doesn't intervene to protest and say that he's not at all wretched. Instead, he just carries on listening. We should note that Socrates drops the sophists because he is acceding to the opinion of Anytus. This isn't a refutation. This is simply a move by Socrates to find what is the opinion of Anytus. We should also appreciate that it is during the discussion about sophists that Socrates makes the issue about Anytus. We are asking how to become like Anytus. Who were the teachers of Anytus? Who made him what he is? Having rejected the sophists, Socrates still continues as if there are teachers who actually teach the virtue which Anytus has. Anytus would be doing Meno a great favor if he told him who these teachers are, because then Meno could become like Anytus, and that is apparently a good thing. Socrates refers to Meno as the patrikos hetairos of Meno, the paternal friend, and this sheds light on the way they became xenoi. It isn't that they happened to meet one day and decided to become xenoi. Their parents, possibly even their grandparents, were already xenoi. Anytus is duty-bound by familial ties to host Meno in Athens. When it comes to hosting xenoi, it seems that Anytus has reflected glory from his father, who must have hosted xenoi. One might think that the best person to teach someone to become Anytus would be Anytus, but Socrates continues to ask who the teachers might be in such a great city. Socrates mentions the great city, referring to Athens, in order to push Anytus now to talk about Athenians. Socrates, as usual, manipulates his interlocutor to give the answer Socrates wants. Tid autou sou ephrasas. Why didn't you tell him? We can see from this reaction that Anytus thinks the answer is obvious, and Socrates in particular, being an Athenian, should have known the answer. We should recall that the question never came up in the conversation between Meno and Socrates because they were not talking about the arete which Anytus has, or allegedly has. And the question of teaching Meno had never arisen. Al husmen ego omen didaskalus tuton enai epon alatun chano den legon hosuphes kai isos ti leges. But I said who I thought were teachers of these things, but I happen not to be saying anything, as you claim, and perhaps you are saying something. Anytus asked why Socrates hadn't told Meno already, and therefore when Socrates says that he has already told him that these teachers were sophists, he's lying because they haven't had this conversation at all. The sophists came up during the conversation with Anytus. using criteria for teachers which Anytus had agreed to. By claiming that he has already given his answer, Socrates is forcing Anytus to give his answer. Allah su de entomere auto epe paratinas elthe Athenaion, epe onoma hotubule. But you, in your turn, tell him to whom he should go of the Athenians. Say a name of whoever you wish. When Socrates asked to whom of the Athenians, he was still using the plural, but then at the last minute he changes to the singular. Say a name of anyone you wish. Anytus now gives the expected answer. Tidehenos anthropu onoma deakusai, hotogaran entyche Athenaion ton kalon kagathon, udes estin hos ubel tiu auton poiese hoi sophistai, anper ethele pethestai. Why must he hear a name of one person? For whoever he encounters of the Athenians, the fine and good ones, there is no one who wouldn't make him better than the sophists would, if indeed he wishes to be persuaded. The fine and good citizens of Athens are the decent people, and this is usually a term for the aristocrats, but Anytus represents the Democratic Party, and they have just driven out the remaining tyrants, so-called tyrants, who themselves were aristocrats. So I'm not sure that Anytus here is referring to aristocrats in particular. He's probably referring to the well-born like himself, the well-to-do, the ones who have made their money through a profession, which is unlike the aristocrats who traditionally were landholders and made their money from rent. Anytus's claim is that Meno could be made better by any of these Athenian citizens if he wishes to be persuaded, which would imply that they are expected to tell him things, and if he is persuaded by what they tell him, then he would be better. Anytus is treating Athenian citizens here as if they are teachers who teach free of charge, which is ridiculous. It would have made more sense if Anytus had said that they would serve as role models, and Meno could learn to become like one of them simply by imitating the way they live